right, good day. Welcome to the NAU Jazz Festival 2021, or welcome back. Happy to be here presenting a bass masterclass, and I want to thank you for tuning in. It's been special to be able to present the festival this year, considering all the challenges we've faced. And even though we have virtual audiences, it's been great to have some fantastic guest artists, faculty masterclasses, having our students involved in the NAU School of Music, and hopefully benefiting the musical community who are tuning in virtually. So we're going to present a bass masterclass today. We have one more trombone masterclass coming up at 1 p.m. with David Vining from the faculty of the NAU School of Music. And then we have a conversation with a couple of our faculty members from the School of Music and Honors College on improvisation. That's a live Zoom session happening today at 4 p.m. Followed by our featured guest artist concert with the big bands NAU Jazz 2 and Jazz 1 this evening at 7 p.m. So I hope you can join us for some of those things. All of this content that's been live streamed is also gradually being added to our NAU Jazz Festival YouTube playlist. The link is also available on the NAU Jazz Festival website, and so if you have anybody that might be interested to tune in after the fact, please find us there. So I'm happy to introduce to you a couple of our bass students, my bass students from the NAU School of Music, Dominic Ryan and Jason Howard. And so we'll play a little bit for you guys to start. My name is Chris Finet, by the way. I'm the bass professor and director of the Jazz Studies program here at NAU. And so we'll play a little bit over a standard tune, just to kind of ease into things and hear a little bit of what we're doing here. This is There Will Never Be Another You. One, two, pedal up front, 2, 3, down. All right, so thank you again for joining us. Thanks to Dom and to Jason as well for joining me for this masterclass. That was kind of an impromptu bass trio of sorts. Kind of an unusual format for bass players, playing in a group of just other bass players. But there are actually some really interesting records that were produced by some of my bass heroes called Super Bass. There's 2 volumes, I think. And it's Christian McBride, Ray Brown, and John Clayton, who do some really inventive things with some standard, and I think a couple of not so standard tunes, where they actually take a bass trio. And they're all really monster players that are well established, respected on an international level. So it may be a little bit of a niche thing, but I think for us bass players, we can appreciate it at the very least. So getting into some topics to discuss today. You heard from all of us at various points, and you heard statements of the melody from both Jason and myself, walking from all of us, some 2-feel, some playing in 4, some trading between Jason and I, and we were definitely, as you could probably tell, making things up as we went. With all going on at the Jazz Festival this year, we had a few minutes to talk before we started today's masterclass and just decided on what sort of format we take. So I'm going to ask these guys at various points to demonstrate some things and go through some of the things that I think about when approaching practicing jazz, practicing jazz bass specifically, and also some things maybe more improvisation related. So first of all, while we heard lots of different roles played by the 3 of us at different points during this performance, we have to remember that that's kind of a special circumstance, and our normal function in the ensemble in various formats is going to be our functional bass playing role. And while it's fun to play melodies and important to learn melodies and to learn vocabulary as improvisers, we have to be able to take care of our function, our primary function first and foremost. And so a few of the things that I like to focus on and work on different ways of isolating these concepts are time, sound, and harmony. Kind of the 3 pillars of what we have to have together to be able to just fill our role as a bass player in the group. So first of all, we're going to talk about how we work on getting in time. There are lots of different things we can do and lots of different ideas on this and a lot of valuable perspectives. One thing that I like to focus on is taking a set duration or a set note length that I can focus on and isolate and use a reference point, such as a metronome, or another practice tool that I really like is called a set of drum tracks called CD metronome. So I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of that and have each of these guys join in, and we're going to trade choruses of of playing in 2. And I'm actually going to limit us to just half notes. So I'm going to start a drum track, and these guys didn't know this was coming, so it's kind of a good realistic format. So I'm going to start a drum track. I'm going to give us 4 bars, and I'll probably have to restart it because the drum tracks are only so long. And I'm going to ask that each of you guys play. We'll start with Jason, then we'll go Dom, and then we'll go me. And we'll each sing a chorus, and we want to focus on getting consistent half notes. We'll do the same thing with quarters in just a second, then we'll talk about some syncopations. But the goal is that regardless of what note we're playing, what finger we're playing it on, what string we're playing it on, that we have the same attack and the note speaks at the same time consistently, or the same point in the beat. So if my time is here, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That D was a little late. So I'm trying to be really critical and detail-oriented about where the notes are speaking. I can kind of think about my sound a bit at the same time, but right now our top priority is time. So I'm using these CD metronome practice tracks, and I'm going to start it, and we'll have Jason take a chorus, Dom take a chorus, I'll take a chorus unless we run out of time on the track. And that'll be a full chorus. We're at 120 right here. And give 4 bars to count in, okay? One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4. track, because the CD metronome tracks, as useful as they are, they're only 3 minutes or so long. And so you run out of playtime before you know it. So here I'm going to start again. I'm going to take maybe just half a chorus for time's sake. And these guys are both doing great. Don actually is a really talented classical bassist and has recently, within the last year or so, found his way and found his interest in jazz and other styles. So we've been talking a lot more recently about approaches to that. So we're all, no matter where we are, at different stages in our growth and development as musicians and as bass players. And especially when we approach a new style or a new skill or technique, there's a learning curve associated with that, and there always is. I'm still working on this exact same thing. Jason, I've been working with for a while, specifically on jazz as well as classical playing. It's just had a little bit more, flight time, if you want to call it that. But one of the things we always want to keep in mind while we're practicing is we have to have a goal in mind. We can't practice aimlessly, or just, we can take some time just playing for fun. And that is what it is. It's still practicing. But if we want to have a goal in mind or a specific task at hand, I think that's a great way to keep our practice structured. And so right now our top priority is time. And so one of the things I noticed with you guys to various degrees is, when we would change strings, sometimes the latency or the time that it takes for that note to speak can sometimes be a little bit different. When we're thinking about note choice, and that's why I decided to focus on half notes right now, so we wouldn't have as much processing to do in terms of walking line construction. Then we also sometimes delay things unintentionally and all of that. So this is our opportunity, and something I like to do on a regular basis, to really zero in on where my notes are speaking in time. And auxiliary to that, I can start to think also about, are the notes sounding evenly? Are the notes consistent in terms of volume, in terms of articulation, clarity, and so on. So I'm gonna give it a shot, and there are always things to be working on. There are certainly gonna be things I hear myself do here, like, man, I gotta focus on that and really zero in on what I'm doing and what I can improve on. Here we go. 2, 1, 2, 3. I thought about there as I was going through is I thought, okay, well, occasionally, and it's a pretty common thing, I would get down to the E string, and I wouldn't be 100% satisfied with either my sound or the notes speaking consistently in time. So I decided to focus on that. The thing is, when we're practicing, for whatever the goal is, we can't just focus on the stuff that makes us feel good and that we already do well. A lot of times we have to force ourselves to focus on the things that we're not as comfortable with and that gets us out of our comfort zone so that we can kind of even the playing field, so to speak, and improve on the areas that we need the most help with. So here, I'm thinking, okay, making sure more rattle there. My strings are a little low these days. So making sure that I can get those notes to speak in time in the same way that I'm hopefully able to do in the middle register on the middle strings. So different ways of approaching practicing time. I could also do the same thing and play metronome games. And what I mean by metronome games is using the metronome in various ways. I'll actually just go ahead and change to my metronome app here. And we'll focus on half notes for a second. We'll move to walking lines in just a minute. What I'm going to do is we were at 120 with the drum tracks, CD metronome. So I'm going to give us the same tempo, only I'm going to put it at half notes. So that's 60. You guys hear that okay? All right, that's 60 to the half note, which translates well to either 2 and 4 or 1 and 3. So I'm going to start, let's do half choruses for time's sake. I'm going to start with Jason. We'll go Jason, down, me. So we'll end up playing a chorus and a half all told. Now, still on quarter notes, sorry, half notes, and so we're practicing a quasi two feel. In an actual playing situation, my two feel might get a few syncopations or a few quarter notes here and there just to give some direction. But right now, we're going to focus and limit the parameters of our focus. So half notes only. This is 2 and 4 for right now. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two on the half. All right, let's try that again. All good, all good. Also, we get a little bit of the performance thing. There you go. With such a seemingly simple exercise, we find ourselves getting kind of bogged down in some of the other thought processes that are going on. Even myself, I'll call myself out here. I was playing kind of a motivic pattern at the start, and I was on the top of the chorus after Don played the second half of the changes of the chorus. So, and I actually played, instead of playing B flat to A, directly to the A flat to G, which was a mistake on my part, just not thinking about things clearly. And so that actually delayed some of the note speaking, or it was kind of the thought process going on here that affected my time. So the reason why we focus on such simple tasks as just playing half notes with a metronome on 2 and 4, or 1 and 3, or just 1, is because it really helps us to be able to devote or focus all of our mental energy on the task at hand, and really prioritize that. And then we'll kind of expand the focus to include other things, and then work on specific other tasks as well, or other concepts. So one more thing on the note of metronome games. I mentioned, using the CD metronome tracks is a great way to practice. Also working with the metronome in various formats. Now I'm going to call that same 60, which is the half note at our tempo, I'm going to call that same 60 beats 1 and 3 and see how that changes things. I'll just take a half chorus myself because I want to keep things moving and get to a few other topics today. So here is 1 and 3. Good. So that's just one other option, and then I'm going to take it down to 30 here, and we're going to call, actually let me get that, we're going to call this just beat 1. And Jason didn't know this, but I'm going to put him on the spot to do the same thing. He was actually with one of our guest stars this morning talking about something similar. Rush Schmidt, who's a great friend, pianist, composer, arranger, and educator. So Jason and Rush were working on a different tune with this sort of concept in mind. Now we're going to call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Cut you off there. So you can go all day just on that. Now I'm going to take the same idea, and that's just one click per bar, and I'm going to call that beat 2. So now, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Town and use that to place the metronome on beat 3, beat 4. You can also start putting the metronome on the ends of any of those beats, which gets increasingly difficult if you're aiming for one click per bar on, say, the end of 1. So all that to say, I mean, it gets to be maybe rudimentary practice in some ways, but it really isolates certain facets of our technique in the way we approach the bass, and the way we approach feeling the time. So one of the things I noticed for all of us, and the varying challenges that are presented with playing the bass, is that sometimes the evenness of sound was not 100% where we wanted it to be, playing across strings. Not only do the notes sometimes speak at different times, but they oftentimes didn't speak with the same presence. And so one of the things, picking on Jason here a little bit, just because well, that's what we do. We keep working on upping the ante and kind of increasing our level for all of us. But one of the things I noticed specifically with Jason here was when he played on the lower strings. There would be kind of a decay or a lacking fullness of sound. And so that's one thing I wanted to bring up that I've talked to these guys about, and I still work on myself all the time, is just sound production. There are a lot of different ways that you'll see bass players and great bass players for that matter approach sound production. I do a lot of classical playing as well, and in working with the bow, the main concepts of sound that we're talking about are, at least on some level, are weight, the amount of weight into the string, bow speed, how fast or slow, and bow placement, whether we're playing near the fingerboard or near the bridge. All of those things are codependent, and they're variables that rely on one another. That translates actually pretty well, in my opinion, to the way we think about sound production on the bass with a Pitts or jazz pizzicato sound. We have to think about how much weight from the right arm, the upper body, we're getting into the string. Speed is not quite the same, though the way we move our arm, there's some parallels there. But placement is a big factor as well. And with our pizzicato sound, we're not talking about being down near the bridge here necessarily, but we're talking about being at the end of the fingerboard, or further up here in the middle of the fingerboard, or further removed from the end. All of those things have a factor on our pizzicato sound. The other thing I try to focus on a lot with my jazz pit sound is the way I get the direction that I get the string moving. And oftentimes we hear bassists, and this bass has a little bit lower action right now with the weather that's been happening recently. It keeps dropping. But we get a lot more rattle than we would like if we're playing heavily. That's because one of the main things that people do sometimes just unconsciously, subconsciously, is play into the bass, into the fingerboard, into the top of the bass, and the motion or energy is going this way. What that causes the string to do is actually vibrate, or oscillate in that direction, and so you're going to get more slap of the string against the fingerboard. than maybe you want. Sometimes you might want that sound. Listen to Ray Brown, one of my favorite bass players, and there are certain notes where he'll come down to the lower register and just, really get that rattle, and that's part of the intent in that case. But you don't want that to be the default. So think about sound production. The motion in your right arm should utilize the weight of your right arm and not just the hand. And you want to follow through, almost using the analogy of hitting a baseball bat or a t-ball at a kid. You want to follow through with that motion. We don't want to just play to the string. We want to play through the string. I also, to the direction I was just talking a minute ago, want to get the string moving as much, or oscillating as much parallel to the top as I can, because then it's going to have the most clearance to be able to sustain. It's much easier to take a long note and make it short, if that's your default, than it is to take a short note and make it long. So what we're going to do is we're going to play some closed notes, and I'm asking these guys to be my guinea pigs here. We're going to focus on getting our right arm on this side of the string, so on the treble side of the string. And our motion, we're going to have to support with the right arm and shoulder and all that. Our motion is actually going to follow through the string so that the string gets moving parallel with the top. And let's take a closed note. Let's take the same tune, since we're actually just talking about it and everybody's on the same page. And we're going to play roots only, play only closed notes, because the open strings will ring on their own no matter what. But we're going to play, if we play a D, we're going to play the note closed. Play a G, we're going to play it closed. Only roots, and we're going to work on getting as much sustain as we can. We're going to trade eighths in this case. We'll just keep the time going, and I'll start. All right, so I'm aiming for getting the hand on this side of the string, supporting with my upper body, with my shoulder, and getting the follow through. One more quick note is I want to make sure that I'm utilizing a bit more than just the tips of my fingers. You'll see lots of different ideas on this if you watch videos or live performances of great bass players. I'm not aiming for maybe the whole side of my hand, but to varying degrees, depending on your hand shape, your instrument, and all of the above, you're going to want to get a little bit more grab or a little bit more purchase on the string, meaning you want to get more contact with the finger. And so I'm aiming for getting on this side of the string and getting at least from my middle knuckle down contact with the string. So I'll take 8, and then we'll go 8 here. So you'll be able to start on the 9th bar, and then we'll pick up there. Okay? We're going for as much sustain as we can manage in a nice, full, even sound. We're not going to put the metronome on just yet. I'm just taking a minute to think about how I'm creating sound, how I'm hopefully keeping it consistent across strings. Again, a fairly rudimentary concept. But it's important that as we cross strings, we deal with the low strings, the high strings, and everything in between, that we keep the same sort of orientation of the right hand. That becomes very similar to what we have to do when I play with the bow, and I have to support the string crossing to ensure that I have contact with the string. So now, when I'm playing with a pizzicato approach, I'm going to try to make sure that my thumb is anchored on the side of the fingerboard, not behind, because that's going to limit my range of motion. And also, it's going to make it so that I can't have consistency between the low, middle, and upper strings. So I'm going to have the pad of my thumb on the side of the fingerboard, and I'm going to move I'm going to play open strings. So just a few ideas on sound production, and we go into much further detail. But that's all we have time for that today. One quick note, and this is something I like to do a lot with my bass students that are focused on classical playing or jazz or both, or other styles as well, is spend a good deal of time working with a reference pitch or a drone. And this can be related to just simple major and minor scales, but it also can be a great way to combine focusing on intonation, which is always a concern of ours with bass, but also with harmony and the way the harmony applies to the instrument. Because we have to, as improvising musicians, be able to negotiate the instrument in ways that we don't have time to plan out what fingering we're going to use, where on the bass we're going to play it, and all of those things. So we have to be really familiar with where things lie on the instrument and how the harmony can be approached, so that we're not having to deal with that challenge or that hurdle in the midst of playing or improvising. So one of the tools that I really like for that sort of practice is called Cello Drones. And so I spend a lot of time myself and with my students using a reference pitch, in this case Cello Drones, and working on a mode and arpeggio routine that I have. Not that it's unique to me, but it's something I've kind of gravitated towards and developed a little bit. So here I'm going to take C major, for example. Takes a moment to load. So if I'm thinking C major, I'm going to go up and down, but I'll stop there for now. I'm also going to play the 7th chord arpeggio. I'm also going to play the 7th chord arpeggio in inversions. I'll stop there for now, just because there's a couple more things I want to get to in the time we have left. But I would take that same approach to, if I'm working on major scale modes, I would practice C major, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, so on and so forth, with the arpeggios up and down and the inversions. And the way that was organized was 1, 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 1, 5, 7, 1, 3, 7, 1, 3, 5. And then a bunch of further variants or variations on that to consider. But that becomes really handy when it comes to negotiating the instrument and being able to play without inhibition, or at least not being inhibited by our limited understanding of where things lay on the fingerboard and our ability to get there consistently. So what I'm going to try to do for a minute, and then we'll have time to play another tune to wrap up. What I'm going to try to do for a minute is ask Jason to play just simply in 2 behind me. We're going to use the same tune that we've been talking about, There Will Never Be Another You. And I'm going to play exclusively using arpeggiations and inversions, right? So if I had just done the same thing on all the keys involved in There Will Never Be Another You, I would have this information or this material under my fingers on the bass. So I'm going to use, this is going to be an exercise, not an actual solo, but I'm going to use arpeggiations and inversions to hopefully make a solo that defines the harmony clearly. We'll take the Kappa chorus. We'll take it nice and slow. 1, 2, if you just play in 2. 2, 3, 4. to be specific to the concepts that I just laid out with arpeggio inversions. We can see how that might be a very narrow approach to improvisation or solo vocabulary. It becomes really helpful in ways to negotiate the instrument and not be limited by, sometimes, as bass players, we end up getting very familiar with this region of the instrument, and then maybe the G string up here. But we have to be able to play cross strings and to do so fluidly, and starting from different registers, different points, and ending up different places. It's always going to be contextual. Where are you starting? Where are you ending? Are you familiar enough with the instrument to be able to execute the ideas that you have and that you've gained through listening and transcribing? So, take a quick minute here to play another tune, and actually, for one quick minute before we do that, we'll make it brief. Why don't you guys, with things that you're working on currently related to the topics that we talked about today, why don't you give a brief summary of what you're working on and how maybe some of the things that we've talked about here play into that, or what role that plays. Dom, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So like Chris said, I'm super new to the jazz scene. I've been playing for a couple months now. So one thing I think is just kind of understanding my role as a jazz bassist. I'm working on connecting through phrases, recognizing patterns a little bit better, working on sight reading and stuff, and maybe sight hearing, basically, like throwing on a tune and seeing if I can play along to it without anything in front to see if I can hear where the direction is going, pull out chords from that. The kind of exercises Chris was showing today, I work on playing tunes exclusively with arpeggios, or a thing we did where whatever chord you do, you just do 1, 2, 3, 5, and then the next chord to 1, 2, 3, 5, and just kind of different games around the bass in order to not really have to think as much as to where the music needs to go, kind of have more of a conversation instead of just playing around with it is kind of the goal I'm setting right now.
Thanks, Dom. What are you working on these days as it might relate to what we're talking about here, Jason?
Something specifically I'm working on right now is trying to put patterns into solo practice, like Chris was talking about with arpeggios. Just to keep things consistent and connect ideas, I feel like patterns, and Chris has stressed this as well, patterns really help trying to connect ideas. For example, like that would be an example of working on patterns for soloing.
Motivic development.
Yeah, motivic
Right.
development.
So that's maybe a conversation for another day, or a continued conversation. What I want to close out with, and you were talking about the tune we talked about earlier.
Oh, ornithology.
Ornithology or
Yardbird.
Yardbird. Why don't we do Yardbird Sweet? So we're going to close out with just a couple of quick choruses of Yardbird Sweet, and then I want to thank you guys for joining us here at the NAU Jazz Festival. Please check out the rest of the events and the concerts and conversation on Zoom later today. And the content will be available on YouTube on the Jazz Festival channel following the event in the next couple of days. So we're going to play a Charlie Parker tune, a jazz standard. Jason and I will play briefly. This is Yardbird Sweet. You want to take the melody?
Yeah.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and. Nice job, Jason. Thank you. Nice job, Tom. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the ongoing support. The NAU School of Music community, our special donors making this year's festival possible, John and Lynn Cheek, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.